Hi, this is Gadiel Khan with Selig Film News, and we're with...
Nyswaner, director and producer of She's the Best Thing in It.
I'm Neda Armian, producer of She's the Best Thing in It.
What is it about Mary that you wanted to show her history, and not only that, but show her battling the modern culture and young people? I love her dynamic with kids today and that battle. Why did you want to show us this? It's such a fantastic doc.
Oh, thanks so much. Well, the movie's about Mary Louise Wilson, who at the age of, she was 79 when we made started shooting, went to New Orleans, her hometown, to teach a class of acting, teach acting for the first time. And I think that I wanted to watch her figure out how to explain what acting is. You know, I mean, we all know, you know, we see a performance and people say, God, so-and-so gave a great performance in this, and so-and-so gave a great performance in this. What is that? What does that mean? What is a great performance? What is it and how they do it? So I thought if I'd heard her explain it and figure it out for the first time, after doing it for 50 years, I thought that would be a great thing to record.
It was kind of amazing to see. I mean, it's probably hard for her, but the frustration part of it, it was hard to convey what her talent is, and that is something dynamic to actors. How do they explain what they do? You know, it's just acting, but not everyone can do it as well as she can, and others like Tyne and you know, the ladies that you got to talk to, Frances. I mean, it seems like that was kind of the essence of the story. I love that. Did you know going in that there was going to be that, in just talking to her, that she might have struggles in explaining it, or was that just how it happened?
Yeah, she told me early on, she says, I don't know if I know how to teach acting. She said, you know, it's like driving a car. You know, really, how do you explain to somebody how you drive a car? It's really hard. When you really try to break it down, at a certain point, they have to feel their way through it. So she knew, especially after the very first class, she knew that she felt she was a little bit in trouble and was feeling kind of frustrated and even despairing of it at a certain point. But then she got through it. She worked at it, and I think it worked out.
I love the fact that you also talk to the kids and their reactions to her and why they're in the class. I love that element to it. Can you explain, you know, talking to them about working with her, even though they might not have seen her ever on stage, they might not have known what her presence was, but she won a Tony, so we have to listen to her, but she does have that brilliance, and they kind of learn it after a while.
They hadn't heard of her, you know, and that's, I think, one of the pleasures of the film, I think, is that you get to know an actor who, if you're in New York theater, if you're involved, at this point now, if you're involved in film and television too, but if you're involved in those worlds, and you mention the name Mary Louise Wilson, people in New York theater especially will say, oh my God, a goddess. You know, John Robin Bates, who's a great playwright, calls her the First Lady of the American Theater. You know, but outside of those worlds, people don't recognize that name, and the students were among those. And so I think I actually think they were a little skeptical at first. You know, she's was teaching them something that they hadn't really been asked to think about, which is how do you bring big emotions, your pain, the experiences you've had in your life, how do you bring it into your art? And by the way, she tells them right early on, I think, Neda, you were there in the first couple of classes, you know, she said, this isn't about acting. So it would be a critique if she were to say to somebody during an exercise, stop your acting. Mm-hmm. We're not acting in this class. We're going to be honest in this class. So it's about honesty up there on stage, not about trying to please and trying to entertain and trying to make people laugh.
Yeah. How quickly did she allow you into her home, and when you did get in there, were you amazed by what you saw? And the way she is at home. I mean, no one gets to see that necessarily.
Well, I have, because we've been friends for 25 years. So I've been in her home many, many, many times. You know, I don't know that there were that many things about her that she revealed to me that surprised me, because I had known some of the major things about her life. But I think I was really pleased that, and Neda, you might want to speak to this, because Neda's a great documentarian and has made documentaries about Jimmy Carter, for example, that it's really moving when people just speak honestly about who they are, on camera. It's an interesting thing. You feel, I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Sure.
It's kind of surprising that they do.
Yeah, so it's interesting because as you were asking the question about what it was like for him as the filmmaker to be in the home, because I know their history and their relationship, I thought the more interesting question, not that your question wasn't interesting, but the more interesting question is, how did she feel about having Ron, her friend, in her home, who's now Ron the filmmaker, with cameras?
Yeah.
And so I wonder what that was like for her, because she was, by nature of having a camera being pointed at you, you change.
Yeah.
You can still be truthful, you can still be honest, but the real question is, what do you do as a filmmaker to make sure that that person at a certain point forgets about the camera? And I think that's what Ron did, and not all filmmakers can do that. So that's why there's a real sense of these two people are just hanging out in her home.
Because we had so often.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like she's aware of the camera, which is not something everyone can capture. That's fascinating. For you guys in your history of producing and working, explain to me you've done TV, you've done film. How do you switch the mold of going to a structure like this where you're trying to tell the story of your friend compared to working on like Ray Donovan, where you've got set story to get through and points you want to hit on, where this you might want to go anywhere with it?
Well, the pleasure of the documentary, first of all, for me, as somebody who's been a TV and film writer for 35 years, I think, is that I was autonomous. Neda was helpful to me and a guide, and but I wasn't pleasing executives, I wasn't pleasing producers, I wasn't pleasing a director, I wasn't pleasing an actor. I was making something that my gut told me was interesting, is what ultimately was the deciding factor. If I liked it, it stayed in. So that was a pleasure. But you tell a story no matter what you're doing. A documentary, you embrace it the same way that you embrace an episode that you're writing of Ray Donovan, or an episode of something else that you're writing, or a feature film. What's the story? What's the beginning? What's the middle? What's the end? Who's the main character? What's the story what's the emotional story beneath the plot that you want to tell? And the documentary is the same thing. And I was given great advice early on, which I pass on whenever I have the chance to people making their first documentary, is that have some idea of the story you're going to tell. Imagine the film that you are going to make, that you want to see presented to people. Imagine it before you start shooting it. Now, it might not be the same film when you finish it, but at least you won't just be pointing the camera. And and especially now with digital, you don't even have to buy film anymore. So you could just, you could have thousands of hours of footage. And then what? Then you're in an editing room and you're lost. Because you've just shot maybe all the wrong things. Maybe you shot the wrong thousands of hours. You just don't point the camera. So you go in knowing that you want to explore certain things. And you
need to be disciplined, I think, in what is the story that you want to tell. Yeah. And in that discipline, you also have to be nimble, because anything could happen and you have to be able to veer from that path. Yeah. But you should have a path.
For example, we went to New Orleans, which is a great place. There's great music, and there's a little bit of New Orleans music in our film. But, it was very seductive to be down there with the camera, and I did. I went to a bar one night, and we did, to start just going around shooting New Orleans street musicians. Actually, I have a few. They didn't make it into the final film. And, and yet, that's not the story. So at a certain point, I knew I was just doing that for fun. You don't point the camera there, don't waste the time. Tell the story you're trying to tell.
So when did you know, okay, this is when I'm doing the right thing, I've got the full story? When was the moment when talking with Mary, or maybe talking with Francis or someone else, that you realized, I can complete this story, I can get to that third act and tell the right story for her and for what I want to do as a filmmaker?
Well, I'll tell you an interesting point that happened before that. There was, in the first year, is that I realized that I hadn't, you mentioned the students sort of describing their experiences. I realized that I hadn't interviewed them enough during the process of the class. So this is giving something away, but I think it's okay. So I went back a year later, because most of the students, the keys, several of the students who were still in New Orleans, still at Tulane, and I restaged interviews. And however, it was staged as, okay, let's pretend we're still in the class. This is a year ago. You've just come out of her class, and she's just introduced this exercise to you. Tell me how that feels. And I had to do it. And that interview, those interviews that you see throughout the film, they're taking place a year later, but they're actually, but you don't feel that when you're watching the film. And the point, and I feel that that's within the appropriate journalistic and, you know, documentary film ethics, you know, because that allowed their interviews to help shape what was happening in the class. So I would say it was, and then when I got to, I would say it was only about a year ago, and working with our co-producer, Jeffrey Schwartz, is also a great editor, and Jeffrey has made many, many documentaries. And when we asked Jeffrey to participate with us in making this movie, he really organized all the footage in a way that made the story kind of apparent. So he contributed a lot.
Jeffrey's had a film at Diff as well.
Oh, he's had
Jeffrey here.
I'm sure he's had a few.
Definitely,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask what is up next for you guys? As kind of a final question. What are you guys working on now? And
What are you working on?
Oh dear.
So many things.
I'm working on so many things, and
can you share any of them with us?
They take a really long time. That's a problem. What am I working on? Should you go first? I
And
gotta
you'll
think.
think
I'm trying to think of
which
like what I
ones?
can talk. No, but what I can talk about.
Yeah.
or not.
Well, I can talk about. I'm on one of the new writers on Homeland, helping to shape and create what's going to happen to Carrie Matheson in season 5, and who's going to live and die along the way, and that's really, really a lot of fun. And I have a movie coming out, a feature film coming out in the fall with Julianne Moore and Ellen Page and Michael Shannon and Steve Carell.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is pretty great cast.
Amazing cast.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate.
Do you want to answer your question?
Various things in development, but I'll share one, which is, and again, as we know with these projects, a year from now it might have been made or it may not. But currently, there's a project that I'm working on that was written by a writer by the name of Jan Motzkin, and it's about Ethel Rosenberg, and the title is Ethel. And one of the producers and the star of it will be Elizabeth Moss, who's a great actress, and a part that I think she's really gonna embrace. It's a beautiful project, and it's a love story, and it's a suspense thriller. It's kind of got all the ingredients for a very juicy story that will be acted beautifully by Elizabeth.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Wow. And thank you guys for coming to Dallas and being a part of the film festival.
It's our
We
pleasure.
love this
It's great.
festival.
Thank you
Thanks.
guys.
Thank you so much.
You're on.
Thanks.
Thank you, Neda.